It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Tuesday, December 16th. We're counting down the days until BYU football takes on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and we'll get an insider look at the Yellow Jackets with someone who covers Georgia Tech. But right now, I'm going to dish out my BYU football awards for the 2025 season.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Thought it was fitting with all the awards that are being handed out around college football these days. Heisman Trophy, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback at Indiana. He takes home the most prestigious award in college football. Bear Bachmeier, he got true freshman All-American recognition from 24/7 Sports yesterday. So I thought this was a good time to roll out my BYU football awards for the 2025 season. We'll start things off with what I think was the best position group in 2025. That's the safety position. I thought with Tanner Wall, Falatau Satuwala, Raider Damuni, Talon Alfrey, they were consistent, they were deep, they were talented, playmakers. The safety position to me was BYU's top position group this season. And I'll say this too, the safeties are not slowing down in the future. You look at 2026 and beyond, BYU is in a great position with that safety group. As long as Jay Hill's there, I don't think it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. And I bring that up because Jay Hill wants his safety, works with that group. Gavin Fowler does as well. But that position group is in great hands. I think Matthias Leach in the future is going to be a really good player for BYU. So safety position is the best position group. That's my award for the best position group in 2025 for BYU football. Special teams player of the year, I would have said in the preseason, Will Farron. Look, I went bold in the preseason and said Will Farron would win the Lou Groza Award. That didn't happen. Will's been struggling as of late, and it's a shame. I still like Will, and I think he's still able to hit a big kick if BYU calls upon him in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And Will, of course, is going to the Senior Bowl, so he's going to get an opportunity to play at the next level. But the special teams player of the year to me, Garrison Grimes. Steady, long snapper. It's not sexy. It's not very exciting to say a long snapper. Still, Garrison Grimes, AFCA second team All-American. The American Football Coaches Association gave him a second team All-American nod. There's value to long snapping. When you mess up, then it gets amplified and it becomes a story. We never talked about him. And for that, he was reliable, and he's the player of the year. I could have gone Parker Kingston because of the punt returns, but it was a little bit up and down with Parker. Remember in the early part of the season, there were some fumbles, and Texas Tech as well. Steady player of the year, Garrison Grimes. I will say, though, too, special teams had a little bit more miscues than we're used to seeing from that group compared to last season. The best game in 2025 for BYU football, you got to go back to October 11th when BYU took down Arizona 33-27 in double overtime, a game that had a long weather delay. It stretched out 5 hours in length. It was a long night in Tucson, but BYU got it done in double overtime. And then when the season ends, you look back on that win. That was one of the great victories of the season for BYU, considering Arizona is one of the best teams in college football this year. They're a top 20 team in the college football top 25 rankings. That was a huge win. And then just the back and forth nature of that game too. BYU starts out strong, then the weather delay, and then Arizona storms back. They take a hold of that game, and then BYU puts themselves in a position to get it to overtime, and then Bear Bachmeier had a miscue. Kyle Safarachuk lands on it. Will Farron makes a field goal. I mean, Bear scores the game-winning touchdown. It was a great game BYU and Arizona, and really to put up 33 points on one of the best defenses in the Big 12. And I think out west, Arizona's a really good team. That was an excellent win, and I would say that's the best game in 2025 for BYU. The next award, Best Moment. Bear Bachmeier's 22-yard touchdown run against Utah. 4:22 to go in the game. Put up BYU by 2 possessions and pretty much made it clear they're going to win their 3rd consecutive game in the rivalry. That's going to be one of those moments. That and the hurdle you could point to from Bear. That's the type of stuff you put a banner inside LaVell Edwards Stadium in the concourse about, because fans will remember that moment forever, where they were when they watched Bear put together that 22-yard touchdown run. And Jason Benetti had a fantastic call. There's a bear on the loose in Provo. Best moment of the season, hands down, for BYU. And speaking of Bear, newcomer of the year, easy choice. Bear Bachmeier, easily the newcomer of the year for BYU this season. It's been pretty remarkable to see the growth of Bear Bachmeier from the start of fall camp to now, how he's improved. It's been, I think, night and day difference. And look, he was pretty good in fall camp too. But he's improved leaps and bounds from where he was in August. In August, he was a little bit up and down. It was kind of shaky where I wasn't fully thinking, man, BYU's going to be an 11-win team with this guy at quarterback. But he got better every single test in front of him. And when you look back at the schedule, it's set up perfectly for Bear to really take off and have a lot of success this year. First game was an FCS game, then a Power 4 opponent that's near the bottom in the Power 4, at least at the beginning of the year in Stanford. A manageable Group of 5 road game, cross country, made a little challenging. He just passed every test. First Big 12 game was on the road, but Colorado wasn't great. First rivalry game, it just continued to level up every single time, and he passed with flying colors. The only time that he didn't pass was against the number 4 team in the country, Texas Tech. But I think you look at Bear Bachmeier's numbers, 2,708 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 picks, 4 of which were only in the regular season. So 4 picks in 12 games. You'll take that even next year. That's really good to only have 1 pick every 3 regular season games. Bear Bachmeier was excellent, but what also made him special too was that ability to run 527 yards on the ground, and BYU needed every bit of those yards considering they had no other running back to turn to besides LJ Martin this year. So Bear Bachmeier, easy pick for newcomer of the year. That's why he was also offensive freshman of the year in the Big 12 Conference. Most improved players, we went offense and defense. Offense, we're going to go Parker Kingston. Who would have thought at this point going into bowl season that Parker Kingston, not Chase Roberts, would be the leading receiver for BYU this season? Parker Kingston, 848 receiving yards this year, 5 touchdowns, big playmaking ability, 61 catches for Parker Kingston this year. He has been the most improved guy, and he might be BYU's wide receiver 1 next year. Now, I think you look at the portal to potentially get some big playmakers at that spot to pair up with Kingston, the Jaron Pula, who comes into the mix. You're going to have some options at receiver, but I think you got to retool that group a little bit. I think Cody Hagen's got to be used more out on the edge. He's not solely just a slot receiver. I think he's sometimes getting miscategorized a little bit. I don't think he's just solely the Parker Kingston slot guy. I think he can line up out wide. But Parker Kingston, excellent season this year for BYU. And then defensively, Falatau Satuala, the leading tackler on this team, 77 tackles. And keep in mind, too, Satuala, there were some miscues last year. You saw the signs of his talent, that interception he had last year against UCF. But even early in this season, there were some assignment miscues. I think even the Portland State game. But he really turned the corner in non-conference play and never looked back. And then when Raider DeMooney went down with an injury against Arizona, it kind of opened the door for Falatau to be the full-time starter, and he was brilliant. Satuwala is big time. He is going to be one of the faces of the program next year. I think he's a preseason all Big 12 type of player next season. Satuwala is a heck of a talent, most improved player on the defensive side this season. And then the MVP, the best player on the team, LJ Martin. I mean, I said it all along this season, even dating back to August when we got this thing rolling daily here on Cougar Tracks. This season goes as far as LJ Martin will take it. And LJ Martin took it really far as he had an incredible season. Best player in the Big 12 offensively. LJ was outstanding. 1,300 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns this season. I think he probably should go to the NFL personally because I don't think his stock is going to be any higher. However, I always get a little bit leery of NFL prognostications and running backs because I would hate to see a situation where you're going into round 6 and LJ still hasn't been taken. That's the fear. But I think, can you exceed what you did this year? Hard to say, especially in every season he's been at BYU. He's gotten banged up at some point. Still, LJ Martin was fantastic this year and heck of a player, and he was by far BYU's MVP this season. Let's take a break. We'll get to know the foe, Georgia Tech, around the corner here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day we go daily live here on the KSL Sports YouTube and my X feed at Mitch_Harper. And of course, you can listen to the audio version of this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you for being on board to the show every single day, making this a daily listen on your routine. So appreciate you for being on board. BYU basketball tonight takes on the Pacific Tigers. Tip-off at 7 p.m. at the Marriott Center. Pre-game begins at 6 o'clock. It'll air nationally on stream, ESPN+. Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler, and Spencer Linton will be on the call. Pacific, an old WCC foe, rolling back into the Marriott Center. Oh, how nice it is to have a game against a team like Pacific in a pre-Christmas spot rather than it's late February and the chase for March is in full swing with this being one of your top games. Imagine this spot. BYU's taking on a Pacific team that right now is in the net number 83 in the net rankings. If that was the case when BYU was in the WCC, we'd be hyping this up like crazy. Oh my gosh, top 100 game in the net, BYU and Pacific. Here we go. Buckle up. Massive game. Tricky spot. Glad we're not talking like that anymore. Now, still, Pacific is capable. Sure. I mean, I think Pacific, you don't want to ever disrespect your opponents. They're an 8-3 ball club. They're decent. They're a solid team. They hung tough with Nevada on the road. Florida Atlantic, they got blown out by them. They nearly took down Cal in Berkeley. So it's not like this is a slouch of a team. They just haven't beat anyone that's got a pulse, really. Their head coach is Dave Smart, who's got strong ties to Canada. He was like a champion at that level in Canada. That program, though, I don't think it's been as good as it was a few years back when Mark Pope and BYU were going up against them with Damon Stoudemire. That's when Pacific had a brief moment where you thought maybe they'll turn the corner and be a little bit competitive as a program and maybe get back to the heights that they once experienced as maybe an NCAA tournament team, because before they joined the WCC in the Big West, they were kind of an annual contender in the Big West Conference. Nothing of the sort since joining the WCC, which when BYU was in the WCC, that was such a strange thing to see. The WCC's announcing they're adding Pacific. You're thinking, why? I just remember when BYU was in the WCC thinking, why are they doing this? Anyway, BYU tonight, number 10 team in the country. Number 6 in the net rankings today is BYU. Pacific's 83, as I noted, number 124 in Ken Palm. Pacific's got a pretty good player from Canada, so strong ties with the head coach, Elias Ralph. He's about 17 points per game. They've also got a point guard who played for Florida last year, the national champions. So it's a decent roster. They got a transfer from Dayton, Long Beach State. As you would expect, it's a mid-major that was rated. Only 2 players returning from last year. Ralph is one of those guys. But statistically, you look at their makeup, not much to really write home about with this team. BYU should win comfortably. And I think it's another spot where, AJ DeBonsic can fill up the stat sheet. I want to see BYU, that bench, continue to thrive. I thought it was great to see Alexei Kostic knock down 5 triples. I really want to see Tyler Murus get going. I think that's important because I think, everyone just kind of assumed Murus is going to fill the Trevenell role. And he's going to be that guy that can just hit a 3. Maybe he can get a gritty, loose ball and swing momentum your way. That just hasn't happened at all. And Murus really got no run against UC Riverside on Saturday. What does his workload look like tonight? Does he get much of an opportunity to really, fill it up and get some shots knocked down? I think that would be huge for someone like him to just get a little bit of confidence heading into Big 12 play. But I do think Pacific's a bigger challenge than UC Riverside. Again, it still should be a game where BYU wins comfortably, but it's a quad 3 game. It's not like it's quad 4. So it's a little bit stiffer test than, say, a sub 200 team that you just know you're going to hammer by 30 or 40. So BYU's got to play well. I think this is a great game where DeBonsa and BYU's big 3 just fill it up and put up big numbers once again. I think Kevin Young talked about it, how you don't want to take for granted what AJ does. He truly was sensational. When you go back and watch that game against UC Riverside, 27 points, just all over the place. Man, what blew me away in that spot, though, was just how effortless it was to get that level of production. AJ's sensational. I just don't see anyone in Pacific that can really cause any sort of headaches for him. And I really want to see Richie Saunders have a big game too, have that shot falling as well, because I'm always of the belief that this BYU team, that they can knock down the 3. I love what they're doing defensively. I think that's something that's real exciting about this group, is that the last 2 games in the second half, they've only allowed 21 points to each of their opponents in the second half. That's really exciting stuff. But then when you unlock the 3-point shot for guys like Richie, for maybe to a lesser extent Tyler Murus, that's when things can really take off for this BYU team, and they can do something really big this season. But BYU Pacific tonight, 7 p.m. tip, pregame at 6. I was thinking back to some of my memories of BYU Pacific over the years. Really, the ones that come to mind, 2016, it's a negative memory. When BYU lost to Pacific at the Marriott Center, 77-72, that was the moment where I'm thinking to myself, what has happened to the Marriott Center Magic? It just, even in the Big 12, BYU rarely loses at home. Like, for every game against a Houston, a Texas Tech, there's many games where BYU is just crushing teams since joining the Big 12. In the WCC, it felt like there were so many teams that would roll into Provo, including Pacific in 2016, that were just far inferior to BYU, and they'd be competitive. And you're like, what has happened here? That one always stands out to me. I also remember in 2020, Yoli Childs returned from an injury, and BYU had a 21-0 run in Stockton to pull away. And remember, that season, BYU closed out the regular season on a 9-game win streak, was riding high going into the postseason, one of the hottest teams in college basketball. But that was a big win for that team in 2020 when Yoli returned from an injury. And then outside of those games, I remember there was one in the 1-25 season. BYU hosted Pacific, and it had Michael Olowokandi. Pacific did, the number 1 NBA draft pick. And Olowokandi, I think, had 16 or 18 points, something to that effect. But just BYU had no answer for the number one NBA draft pick in Olowokandi. And I remember watching that game and just thinking, had no context that was going to be a number one NBA draft pick watching, because I thought, who's Pacific? That's an ocean. Who is that? But those are my memories really of BYU Pacific. And that's the thing about these type of opponents, is that the memories kind of get blurred. You remember all the St. Mary's games, you remember all the Gonzaga games, but anyone outside of those two, maybe San Francisco to a lesser extent, but all the other games in the WCC, you only remembered them if BYU laid an egg. If it was a negative game. That's just kind of how it works back in the WCC. It's good that BYU's in the Big 12, because you're not seeing AJ, you're not seeing Kevin Young at BYU if you're not in the Big 12, the toughest league in America. So we can appreciate the days of the WCC and what it meant for BYU, because let's face it, BYU had nowhere to go. They took their football program independence, and they needed a landing spot. And the WAC situation got blown up. They needed a landing spot. In comes the WCC, and it worked. But now that you're a few years removed, you just realize, man, that was tough. That was tough to get hyped about. And the margin for error was razor thin. You had no margin for error to have any sort of slip up. You had to be perfect. I remember Tim Lacombe years ago, former BYU assistant coach, said trying to chase Gonzaga at that time, because they were unbeatable, and they're dang good this year too. The Pac-12 going forward is going to be really good with the Zags. But it was like chasing ghost. You just knew you weren't going to, it was just almost impossible, because they never lost to anyone. So you had to be nearly perfect to win anything in the league. It's crazy that the Big 12, even as deep as it is, you feel more optimistic about the chances of winning a Big 12 title if you're BYU compared to the days of winning the WCC. I know that sounds so strange, but if you lived it, you understand it, because it just didn't make, it was so difficult for BYU to navigate the WCC. Anyway, BYU Pacific tonight, 7 p.m. tip. I will be inside the Marriott Center with coverage on KSLSports.com, and you can listen to the call on KSL NewsRadio. Final break. On the other side, you'll get to know Georgia Tech with the Georgia Tech Insider next here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL NewsRadio. Mitch Harper with you. BYU football head coach Kalani Sitake and Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key were in Orlando yesterday having a little bit of a Pop-Tarts Bowl media day. They were with the trophy and both ate Pop-Tarts out of the toaster trophy. That might be the motivation the team needs. Win that trophy. That toaster trophy, one of the great trophies in the bowl season. It's up there with the New Mexico Bowl pottery trophy. It's a great one. It's a good bowl game trophy. And BYU will look to take down the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets to get that trophy and to get to know Georgia Tech. I was joined by Jackson Caudell, publisher of Georgia Tech on SI. Here's my conversation with Jackson. BYU football continues preparations for the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and they'll be taking on Georgia Tech. Only the second time ever BYU taking on an ACC team in the bowl season. And to break down the Yellow Jackets in this top 25 matchup, joined now by Jackson Caudell, publisher of Georgia Tech on SI. You can follow him on X and on Instagram. And Jackson, appreciate you hopping on board. This is a pretty good matchup, top 25 matchup, but when it comes to bowl games, there's always a question about motivation. How motivated is this Georgia Tech team to end this season on a high note?
Very motivated. The season started out great. They started out 8-0, got into the top 10, faltered down the stretch, mostly due to defensive issues, lost 3 of the last 4. But it's still an overall really good season. And for what Brent Key has been building, when he took over, Georgia Tech hadn't been to a bowl game in quite a few years. They hadn't won more than 3 games at all under Jeff Collins. And, they won 5 when he was the interim. They won 7 back-to-back years. They went 9-3 this year. and you have a chance to finish with 10 wins for the first time since 2014, and you have a chance to finish the season ranked. And because you're playing in a high-profile bowl game against the team that, almost made the college football playoff and is number 12, like if you win this game, like you could finish the season ranked in the top 20. And even given some of the faltering down the stretch, like that's still an incredible season, especially considering where the program was just a short time ago. So they are very motivated. This is a team that is very much looking forward to playing in this game.
BYU and Georgia Tech kicks off Saturday, December 27th, 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll have extended pregame beginning at 10 a.m. here on KSL. And I'm curious, Jackson, with this matchup, Haynes King, I think this is anything going to change with this offense now that Buster Faulkner's going to Florida? What's kind of the offensive game plan going into this one? Is it more of the same and relying on Haynes King?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the overall game plan is going to change, but, it's more than just Buster Faulkner. I mean, assistant quarterbacks coach A.J. Erderly, he left. Offensive line coach Jeep Wade is gone. Assistant offensive line coach Mike Pauley is gone. Running backs coach Norvell McKenzie is gone. Wide receivers coach Trent McKnight is reportedly possibly leaving. Like, there's just a huge chunk of this offensive staff for Georgia Tech that's not going to be on the field coaching in this game. And so I don't want to say keep it simple, but like I don't think you're going to see just a radically new, game plan in 2 weeks. This offense, it lives and dies with Haynes King, whether he's their leading rusher. Like he is the MVP of this football team, finished 10th in Heisman Trophy voting. So like I still think everything is going to revolve around him being physical up front on the lines of scrimmage and running the football.
You brought up the fact that Haynes King was 10th in the Heisman voting. What makes King so special? I think for BYU fans that maybe haven't watched Georgia Tech as close, I know maybe some watched the season opener against Colorado facing a Big 12 team, but what's made Haynes King so special since he transferred over from Texas A&M a handful of years ago?
There's a lot of things, I think, both on the field and off. Like he is – I know it's kind of cliche with all the leadership and intangibles and stuff, but like he is a tremendous leader, both in the locker room and just a tremendous face for this program and helping them get to where they are today. And then just on the field, like gutsy and like a warrior doesn't even like begin to really describe it, but those are the words like I would use for it. Like, it feels like every time he gets hit really hard, it just like makes him stronger. Like if you see Haynes King limping around, like you need to be worried because then you're going to get the absolute best version of Haynes King. There's no quit in him. Like he, again, just gutsy, a warrior. Like there's just a lot of stuff just that he does that you don't really find anywhere else. Although like I do think like him and Bear Bachmeier are similar in a lot of ways.
Talk with Jackson Caudell here, publisher Georgia Tech on SI here on Cougar Tracks on KSL News Radio. Georgia Tech defensively, the stats would say the run defense isn't great, and I think that's music to the ears of BYU because the Cougars love to run the football, whether it be with Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin, and still probably got to wait to see on LJ. He's someone that could be maybe considering the NFL, so I'm curious to see what happens there. BYU saying that no opt-outs as of now, but the low rush defensive numbers for Georgia Tech. Is there context behind that? To tell us a little bit about that defense, and are they as poor as the defensive rankings would suggest?
Yes, like there's not another way for me to say that. So at the beginning of the year, they were the perfect definition of bend but don't break. Like they actually like some of the statistical numbers like rushing defense, passing defense, and some of the underlying numbers weren't great, but they were actually in like the top 25 and top 30 of scoring defense for like some of the year. Like they would give up some yards to teams. Like the Duke game is a perfect example. Like Duke nearly had 500 yards of offense in that game, but they only scored 19 points because, they had a fumble at the goal line. They had a mishandled field goal. They had a missed field goal. They had all kinds of issues. But over the last month, like the dam just broke, like everything just collapsed. And it started with the loss to NC State. They gave up nearly 600 yards to NC State, who is an okay football team at best. Like they're 7-5. It carried over into the next game. They played Boston College, who, for anybody listening that didn't know, Boston College is 2-10 this year. They put up 550 or so yards on Georgia Tech and just completely unstoppable. They ranked 120th, or around 120th or so in rushing offense, and like they nearly got 200 on the ground. And it carried over, into the loss against Pittsburgh, where they gave up close to 200 or a little over 200 yards rushing. The defense played a lot better, actually, the last time out against Georgia, but it was mostly in affecting the quarterback and in pass defense. Georgia was still able to be really physical, especially in the first half. So when I first saw this matchup of these two teams in the bowl game, like that was the thing outside of like just losing all the staff members now on offense. It's like, if BYU is a really physical team and they're excellent at running the football, like if Georgia Tech can't stop them, then like I don't know how they win the game personally.
Talk with Jackson Caudell here for a few more moments. Is there any players that you're kind of keeping tabs on for potential opt-outs or availability, whether it be injuries or opt-outs? Is there guys on the Georgia Tech team that you're looking at that you're going to be monitoring leading up to kickoff?
Right now, I'm going to say no. Like, I think this team is all in, especially the senior class. I mean, there's 27 seniors on this team that have, been through the entire rebuild from 2022 on. Now, that could change. Like, for me, I don't know if I want to speculate on that just because, things can get crazy with the transfer portal. When you have offensive staff members leave, that always comes into question, like, okay, are any players going to go with them? But right now, I would anticipate no. But, I mean, that could drastically change in, like, 24 hours.
No question. I mean, it is crazy this time of the year. It's the bridge between one season and another for these college football programs. And a guy that appears to be going to be leading it for the years to come for Georgia Tech is Brent Key. Kalani Sitake and Brent Key both talked about how they're alums at the respective programs. Has that been the key to the success for Brent Key? Is that he is an alum and he understands how this program operates? What's made him so successful here and to lock up a contract extension through 2030?
Well, again, I'll kind of go back to some cliches in football. It's like he is the perfect fit for Georgia Tech. He played at Georgia Tech, was an excellent player there, made all ACC. They won several games when he was there. Like, it was one of the more successful periods and extended period in Georgia Tech history. He came back to coach. I mean, he voluntarily left Alabama after playing or coaching in 3 straight national championship games to come to Georgia Tech in 2019 as the offensive line coach. And then, when he took over as the interim, he nearly willed them to a bowl game after starting 1-3. Like, he is the perfect culture building head coach, and especially for Georgia Tech. Like, their identity is be physical, run the football, and finding the right fits for your program. And I think he does that. I won't say as well as anybody. He's not a perfect head coach, but like he does that. Just he's outstanding at that. I'll say, and like again, he is just a perfect fit for Georgia Tech. He understands the place, and just what he's been able to do here in just the short amount of time is pretty incredible in my opinion.
Along with Haynes King at quarterback, who are some other players that we should be aware of that? Some of the top guys for this Georgia Tech team?
So just sticking with offense, they use a running back tandem of Jamal Haynes and Malachi Hosley. Jamal Haynes hasn't, had quite the year everybody thought he might have coming into the year, but Hosley's a transfer from Penn. He's been fantastic. Isaiah Canyon and Eric Rivers are a really good wide receiver duo. Canyon's a more bigger physical type of player. Eric Rivers is kind of the deep threat. You can't forget Malik Rutherford either. He's been with the program for a long time. Keelan Rutledge is an all-ACC guard. He kind of leads the charge up front. Defensively, I would say that the names to know, like Kyle Eford at linebacker, he's arguably the leader of the defense along with Jordan Vandenberg at defensive tackle. I would say those are probably the 2 names to know up front. And then in the secondary, Amari Harvey, who got injured during the middle of the year. He was injured in the Syracuse game, came back. He's had a really good season on a unit that hasn't really played all that well, but like those would be the names I would suggest.
He's Jackson Caudell, publisher of Georgia Tech on SI, kind enough to carve out some time with me to get a lowdown on this Georgia Tech team. I think this is going to be a good game, Jackson. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to your bylines on Georgia Tech on SI, and we'll see how this game plays out in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me.
Big thanks to Jackson for hopping on to the show to give an insider look at Georgia Tech. And that's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I'll be back tomorrow with a breakdown of BYU Pacific and also talk more BYU football as we start to dive into this BYU versus Georgia Tech matchup in the Pop-Tarts Bowl on Saturday, December 27th. Kickoff at 1:30. Extended pregame begins at 10 a.m. on KSL. Talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports.